The Sound of Waves, Chapter 15. The Utajima Maru returned to Kobe several days behind schedule. So, by the time the captain and Shinji and Yasuo reached the island, where they were to have returned before mid-August, in time for the Lunar Calendar Lantern Festival, the festivities were already over. They heard the news of the island while being ferried across on the Kamikaze Maru. A huge turtle had come ashore on 5 League Beach a few days before the Lantern Festival and had been quickly killed. There were more than a basketful of eggs in it, which had been sold for 2 yen apiece. Shinji went to worship at Yashiro's shrine to give thanks for his safe return, and then on to Jikichi's, where he had been immediately invited for a celebration. Over the protests of the boy, who never drank, his sake cup was filled many times. 2 days later, he once again went out fishing on Jikichi's boat. Shinji hadn't said anything about his voyage, but Jikichi had heard all the details from the captain. "I hear you did a great thing." "Oh, no." The boy blushed a little, but had nothing further to say. Anyone unfamiliar with his personality might easily have concluded that he had spent the last month and a half off sleeping somewhere. Jikichi was silent a while and then spoke in an offhand way. "Have you heard anything from Uncle Teru?" "No." "Oh." No one made any mention of Hatsue, and Shinji, feeling no great loneliness, threw himself into the old familiar work, while the boat rocked in the rough seas of the dog days. The work fit both his body and soul perfectly, like a well-tailored suit, leaving no room for the intrusion of other worries. The strange feeling of self-sufficiency didn't leave him all day. At dusk he saw the outline of a white freighter sailing far out at sea, and it was different from that he had seen on the day so long ago. But once again Shinji felt a new emotion. "I know where that ship is bound for," he thought. "I know what sort of life they live aboard it, what sort of hardships they have. I know everything about that ship." At least, the white ship was no longer a shadow of the unknown. Instead, there was that about the distant white freighter trailing its long plume of smoke through the late summer dusk that quickened his heart even more than had the unknown. The boy felt again in his hands the weight of that lifeline he had pulled with the last ounce of his strength. With these strong hands he had certainly once actually touched that unknown at which he had previously stared from a great distance. He had the sensation that now, by simply stretching out his hand, he could touch that white ship out at sea. On a childish impulse, he held his 5 big-knuckled fingers out toward the sea to the east, already thick with the shadows of evening clouds. Summer vacation was half over, and still Chiyoko didn't come home. The lighthouse keeper and his wife waited day by day for their daughter's return to the island. The mother wrote an urgent letter. No reply came. She wrote again. 10 days later, there was a grudging answer. Giving no reason, Chiyoko simply wrote that she wouldn't be able to come back to the island during this vacation. The mother finally decided to try tears as a means of persuasion and sent a special delivery letter of more than 10 pages, pouring out her feelings and begging her daughter to come home. A reply came when only a few days remained of vacation and a week after Shinji's return to the island. It was a reply which the startled mother had never dreamed of. In her letter, Chiyoko confessed how she had seen Shinji and Hatsue coming down the stone stairs, arm in arm that day of the storm, and how she had landed the two of them in great difficulties by the uncalled-for act of running to Yasuo with the tail. Chiyoko was still tormented with feelings of guilt, and she went on to say that unless Shinji and Hatsue finally found their happiness, she herself would be too ashamed ever to come back to the island. If her mother would act as a go-between and persuade Terukichi to let them get married, this was the condition she set for her return to the island. This tragic, demandingly badgering letter sent chills up the kind-hearted mother's spine. She was struck with the thought that, unless she took appropriate steps, her daughter, unable to bear the pangs of conscience, might even commit suicide. From her wide reading, the mistress of the lighthouse recalled various frightening instances of adolescent girls who had killed themselves over some equally trivial matter. She decided not to show the letter to her husband, the lighthouse keeper, and told herself that every day counted, that by herself she would have to manage everything at once in such a way as to bring her daughter home as quickly as possible. As she changed into her best clothes, a suit of white cambric, there was reborn within her the mettlesome feeling of years gone by when, as a teacher in a girls' high school, she was on her way to complain to some parent about a problem student. Straw mats were spread out in front of the houses along the roadside leading down into the village, and on them there were sesame and red beans and soybeans drying in the sun. The tiny green sesame seed, washed by the late summer sun, cast their miniature spindle-shaped shadows one by one across the coarse straw of the fresh-coloured mats. From here one could look down upon the sea. The waves were not running high today. As the mother descended the steps that formed the main street of the village, her white shoes made light sounds against the concrete. Then she began to hear lively, laughing voices and the springy sound of wet clothes being beaten. She drew nearer the sounds and found a half-dozen women in house dresses doing their laundry by the side of the stream bordering the road. Shinji's mother was one of the group. After the lantern festival, the diving women had more leisure, going out only occasionally to gather edible seaweed, so they turned then to an energetic washing of the accumulation of dirty clothes. Using almost no soap, they one and all would spread the laundry over flat rocks and trample it with their feet. "Why, hello, mistress. Where are you on your way to today?" They all bowed and called out their greetings. Beneath their tucked-up skirts, the water reflections were playing over their dark thighs. "I just thought I'd drop by Terakichi Miyata-san's place a minute." As she made this reply, it occurred to her that it would be strange to meet Shinji's mother this way and then, without so much as a word to her, proceed on to arrange for her son's engagement. So she turned and started down the precipitous flight of slippery, moss-covered stone steps that led from the road to the stream. Her shoes made the descent perilous, so, turning her back to the water, but stealing many a glance over her shoulder, she backed slowly down the steps on all fours. One of the women, standing in the middle of the stream, reached out and lent her a helping hand. Reaching the bank, she took off her shoes and began to wade across. The women on the farther bank stood watching her hazardous progress with blank amazement. She caught hold of Shinji's mother's sleeve and made a clumsy attempt at private conversation, whispering words into her ear that everyone around could plainly hear. "Maybe this isn't quite the place, but I've been wanting to ask how things have gotten on for Shinji-san and Hatsue-san lately." The suddenness of the question made the other's eyes grow round, and she said nothing. "Shinji-san likes Hatsue-san, doesn't he?" "Well, and still Terakichi-san is standing in the way, isn't he?" "Well, that's what the trouble is, all right, but... and how does Hatsue-san feel about it?" At this point, the other divers, who couldn't have helped overhearing, broke into the private conversation. Where talk of Hatsue was concerned, all the divers, without exception, had become her staunch defenders ever since that day when the peddler had held the contest. They had also heard the whole true story from Hatsue herself, and were one and all against Terakichi. "Hatsue, she's head over heels in love with Shinji too. That's the plain truth of it, mistress. And yet, would you believe it? That Uncle Toru is planning to marry her to that good-for-nothing Yasuo. Have you ever heard of such foolishness?" "Well, that's that," said the mistress of the lighthouse, as though addressing a classroom of students. "Today I received a threatening letter from my daughter in Tokyo, saying she didn't know what she might do if I wouldn't help the two married. So I'm on my way to have a talk with Terakichi-san, but I thought I ought to stop and find out how Shinji-san's mother felt about it first." Shinji's mother reached down and picked up her son's sleeping kimono, which she had been treading clean beneath her feet. Slowly she proceeded to wring it out, gaining time for thought. Finally she turned to face the mistress of the lighthouse and bowed her head low. "I'll greatly appreciate anything you can do," she said. Moved by a spirit of helpfulness, the other women went into a noisy conclave with each other, like a flock of waterfowl beside a river, and decided that if they went along too as representatives of the women of the village, the show of strength might help awe Terukichi. The mistress of the lighthouse agreed, so the 5 of them, not including Shinji's mother, wrung out their washing hurriedly and ran to take it home, arranging to meet at the bend of the road leading to Terukichi's house. The mistress of the lighthouse stood just inside the gloomy, earthen-floored room of the Miyata house. "Good day," she called in a voice still youthful and steady. There was no answer. The other 5 women stood just outside the door, their sunburned faces thrusting forward like so many cactus leaves, their eyes glittering with enthusiasm as they peered into the dark interior. The mistress of the lighthouse called out again, her voice echoing emptily through the house. Presently, the staircase gave a squeak, and Terukichi himself came down wearing an undressed kimono. Hatsue was apparently not at home. "Why, it's Mistress Lighthouse Keeper," Terukichi grumbled, standing imposingly on the threshold leading up from the earthen floor. Most visitors at this house felt the urge to flee when received by this perpetually inhospitable visage with its bristling mane of white hair. The mistress herself was daunted, but she drummed up courage to continue. "There's something I'd like to talk with you about for a minute." "So? All right, please come in." Terukichi turned his back and promptly went up the stairs. She followed him, with the other 5 women tiptoeing after her. Terukichi led the way into the inner sitting room upstairs, and, without further ceremony, took the seat of honour in front of the alcove for himself. His face revealed no great surprise when he noticed the number of visitors in the room had grown to 6. Ignoring them all, he looked towards the open windows. His hands were toying with a fan, showing a picture of a beautiful woman advertising a drugstore in Toba. The windows looked out directly over the island's harbour. There was only one vessel inside the breakwater, a boat belonging to the cooperative. Far in the distance, summer clouds were floating over the Gulf of Eyes. The sunshine outdoors was so brilliant that it made the room seem dark. On the alcove wall there hung a calligraphic scroll done by the last governor but one of Mie Prefecture, and beneath it, gleaming with a lustre like that of wax, there was an ornamental rooster and its hen, their bodies carved out of a knotty and gnarled root of a tree, and their tails and combs formed with the natural growth of the slender shoots. The mistress of the lighthouse sat at this side of the bare rosewood table. The other 5 women, having mislaid somewhere their courage of a little while before, now sat primly just in front of the bamboo blind hanging in the entrance to the room, as though they were giving an exhibit of house dresses. Terukichi continued looking out the window and didn't open his mouth. The sultry silence of a summer afternoon came upon them, broken only by the buzzing of several large bluebottle flies that were flying about the room. The mistress of the lighthouse wiped the sweat from her face several times. At long last, she began to speak. "Well, what I want to talk to you about is your Hatsue-san and the Kubo family's Shinji-san." And Terukichi was still looking out the window. After a long pause he spoke, seeming to spit out the words. "Hatsue and Shinji?" "Yes." Now, for the first time, Terukichi turned his face toward her, and then he spoke, without so much as a sign of a smile. "If that's all you have to talk about, it's already settled. Shinji's the one I'm adopting for Hatsue's husband." There was a stir among the women, as though a dam had burst, but Terukichi went right on speaking, paying not the slightest heed to his visitor's reaction. "But in any case, they're still too young. So, for the time being, I've decided to leave it at an engagement, and then, after Shinji comes of age, we'll have a proper ceremony. I hear his old lady isn't having too easy a time of it, so I'll be willing to take both her and the younger brother in, or, depending upon how it's finally decided, help them out with some money each month. I haven't said anything to anybody about all this yet, though. I was angry at first, but then, after I made them stop seeing each other, Hatsue became so out of sorts that I decided things couldn't go on that way. So I decided on a plan. I gave Shinji and Yasuo berths on my ship and told the captain to watch and see which of them made the best showing. I let the captain tell all this to Jukichi as a secret, and I don't suppose Jukichi has told Shinji even yet." Well, anyway, to make a short story of it, the captain really fell in love with Shinji and decided I'd never be able to find a better husband for Hatsue. And then when Shinji did that great thing in Okinawa, well, I changed my mind too and decided he was the one for my girl. The only thing that really counts. Here, Terakichi raised his voice emphatically. The only thing that really counts in a man is his get up and go. If he's got get up and go, he's a real man. And those are the kind of men we need here on Utajima. Family and money are all secondary. Don't you think so, Mistress Lighthousekeeper? And that's what he's got, Shinji. Get up and go.